hopefully it works. Okay, so I've just popped in the figures from the top part of the question. So the same wages, the same cumulative earnings and all that kind of stuff, right? Because effectively it's the same. On your tax deduction card sheet, there is a box in there for USC this week. It just says USC deducted or USC refunded, but it doesn't give any space for doing a calculation. So that's why I've given you a separate USC card, just so that you can spread it out. But if you want, when you're presenting the question, you can have your USC card behind it and just do a full summary on the tax deduction card for PRSI and net pay or whatever if you want. Okay, so in terms then of while he's on emergency tax for USC is, you know, we saw with the tax that depending on if they provide a PPS number or depending on, you know, whether they're in week 1 or week 4 or whatever, they may get the benefit of a standard rate cutoff point and tax credits. With USC, it doesn't make any difference. If they're on emergency tax, the rate of USC that applies is 8%. Okay, so again, from a payroll point of view, payroll operator point of view, it's very easy. It is just his wages multiplied by 8%.
So while he's on emergency tax, he pays
full 8%, yeah. And like it's, you know, it's lovely for us because you literally just go 485 by 8% and that's fine. So his total USC due this week is 3880 and his USC deducted this week is going to be 3880. So lovely. Okay, very straightforward. In turn, and same in week 4, 5, and 6, it is just going to be his gross pay multiplied by 8%. I'm just putting it into the rate 4 and into the, what way is your columns? So it's cumulative, yeah, the rate 4 and the cumulative USC and the USC deducted. Okay, so it's lovely insofar as, you know, it's just a straightforward calculation. Sorry.
So that's 8% of the 485, is it?
8% of his gross pay, yeah. Okay. So whatever he earns this week, we'll just multiply it by 8%. So that's while he is on emergency tax. So the key thing to remember with the USC and emergency tax is it doesn't matter, you know, whether he has sent, it doesn't matter whether he's given us a PPS number or anything like that. It's all a flat 8%. Okay. So okay with that? So 3880, 4392, 5480, and 6960. Is it? Oh yeah. Thank you. 4320. That's what happens when you big fat fingers like me. Happy with that? Yeah. Just in the USC deducted field is all. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so then we know that in week 7 and 8, he went on to week 1. Okay. And we know from our tax situation that when somebody's on a week 1, they won't get a refund of any tax that they have paid over and above what they should have. The same thing applies with USC. it looks at that week in isolation. It doesn't care what has happened before. It's just calculating on the basis of the figure that it sees. So we're going to do the calculation on the basis of the cutoff points that he has, and pop them in. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to put in the cutoff points, okay, so you can see where the figures are coming from. So we know the 12012. I'm just going to pop them in so that I have them, that I'm not referring back. Okay, so I'll just pop them there for a sec. Okay, so the first 12012, I've divided that by 52 and it works out at 231 a week. Okay, I'm going to fill in his rate 2 cutoff point and his rate 3 cutoff point just so that I have them as well. His rate 2 cutoff point is 27,382 minus the 12012 divided by 52. Okay, so we know when we did it on an annual, we would have said it was 27,382 minus the 12012 was his rate 2 cutoff point, and that we're getting that figure, and then we're just going to divide it by 52 to work out whatever it is every week. Okay, so that's 295.58, and his rate 3 cutoff point minus the 27,382 and divide that by 52. Works out at 820.42. Now, I would say to you, when we get to rate 3, you have to be conscious of the person's wages, okay? So don't just assume that there's enough wages there to cover it, okay? You have to be conscious of what if they earned. You have to at all rates, like, to make sure that in that particular week that they have enough earnings to cover what you're trying to USC, but in particular on rate 3, because you know that adds up to 1347, and that's the rate at which this 8% kicks in. So somebody needs to have fair good earnings in order to be at the max of the rate 3 cutoff point. So just get into the habit of just kind of doing a little calculation to make sure it makes sense. Now we'll do it in a sec to make sure. So when he's in week 8, he's still on week 1, so those cutoff points will stay the same. Okay, now they're the exact same cutoff points as we worked out on an annual basis. We just said the 70,044 less the 27. We're doing that again. We're just now dividing the answer by 52. Okay, so bear with, it will make sense in a second. Okay, hopefully. So in terms then of the actual calculations, so these are his cutoff points. I'm just going to put those in bold so that we can differentiate between them. So the first 231 euros of his wages is going to be USC'd at 0.5%. That works out at 116. The next 295.58 is going to be USC'd at 2%. Now, the good thing is these cutoff points will be the same when he moves on to cumulative, and you're just going to multiply them by the week number. Okay, so just kind of get used to seeing these figures and where they're coming from. Okay, so the 116 and the 591, so that's the 231 by the 0.5%. This lad is the 295 by 2%. And this is where I just ask you to look at me for 2 seconds, well, not at me, at the board, for 2 seconds, and just see where the figure is coming from. So he has wages of 720 euros. Agreed? We have USC'd 231 euros of it plus 295.58. Agreed? So what we have left to USC is the difference between 720 minus these two. Okay, and that's what's going to be liable for rate 3. So it's going to be his wages minus the rate 1 cutoff point minus the rate 2 cutoff point. and that we will multiply by 3%. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. Don't just take this figure and multiply it by 3% because he hasn't earned that much. Okay, so you just kind of have to think about what you're doing on the USC, and it is complicated. Like it is more complicated than the payroll, than the tax. So just do take your time and try and figure out what's going on with it. 820 is the 70044 minus the 27382, and then we divided that by 52 to get the weekly amount. Does that make sense?
Why is that important? If we don't do that number by 3%.
Because he hasn't earned that. He's only earned 720. So if you do 820 by 40, 820.42 by 3%, you're overstating the amount of USC that you're USC him on earnings of 1347, but he hasn't earned 1347. So he'd be paying too much USC based on his earnings. Yeah. So that's the cutoff point, but he's below the cutoff point. Okay. So he has nothing due at rate 4. So his total USC this week will be this, plus this, plus this. So this week he will pay USC of 1287. Okay, so you can see it's way down on what he was paying when he was on emergency tax. Okay, but it's still not right. Like it's still not cumulative. Okay, so I'll do the calculation and then we'll talk through it again and see did it make sense. Okay, because I'd say rather than trying to write it down, try and follow the logic of it first, and then I'll explain it again as to where all the figures are coming from. Okay, because if you're trying to write it down, you'll miss out on something. So follow me, and then we'll go back and write and make sure it's okay. So the 231 again is coming from this is the rate 1 cutoff point. So the first income up to 12012, we've worked out 12012 divided by 52 works out at 231. So we're going to USC, the first 231, it's going to be the same as the line above it, 0.5%, 116. The next 295.28, which is the 27382 minus 12012, and we get that answer and we divide that total by 52, and that works out at 295.28. It's going to be the exact same as the line above, 591. Okay, so that they're okay, they're easy enough. Okay, and the question we have to ask ourselves is, has this fella earned more than 1347? Okay, because 70044 divided by 52 is 1347. If he has earned more than 1347, then we can just take this amount and multiply it by rate 3. Okay, because he's going to be in the rate 4 band. If he has earned less than 1347, then we need to make sure how much of this standard rate cutoff point or this USC cutoff point, how much of it is he using? Okay, we can't just take 820 and multiply it by 3%. We have to see what are his wages, what have we already USC'd. Okay, so his wages are 980 euros. We have already USC'd 231 of it, and we have already USC'd 295. Okay, and I'm not going to do the percentage for the moment. So there's 453 euros of his wages that we haven't USC'd yet. Okay, so that's what I'm saying to you. You can't just take that amount and do a flat calculation. So of that 453, we're going to multiply that by 3%. What's it? And that works out at 1361. Okay, he has nothing at rate 4. His total USC this week is the 116 plus the 591 plus the 1361. Works out at €20.68. Okay. And that's the amount of USC he will pay this week.
So as long as the income not above 70.
Yep.
444,
Yep.
we can hold on to 231, 295.58, and 82. So that's constant.
Yes.
Even 1.16, that'll be the same. 5.91, that'll be the same.
It'll be the same, but it'll be cumulative now.
No, in the next one.
Yeah.
For this.
Yeah. Yeah.
This,
Yeah. Yeah.
this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
No matter what we do, when we're in that gap.
Yeah.
before it's
Now,
finished.
what some people find easier to do is rather than putting in the 820.42 as a figure the whole way down, that they actually work out, say that, like I did there, that 450 figure, and they find it easier to put in the 450 figure and then just multiply by rate 3. So it's whatever you find easier. So, you know, rather than just that you'd be looking and saying, in any week, has he earned more than 1347? If not, then 980 minus this, and whatever's left over is what you put here. And then it's just a straightforward, that figure by 3%. So it's whatever works for you. Yeah, no, he will. But that's 820 is that cutoff point. But we need, that means that if we add the three of those together, it's 1347. So anything, if he earns more than 1,347 in a week, he'll go into the high rate. So it's the three of those added together. So that brings him 820, 42 by 52 should be 70.44. So just let me double check. Sorry. Oh, sugar, if I could do maths, it would be. So if I add the three of those up, it should come to 70.044. It's a little bit off because I obviously did something wonky in my calculation, but it should be that anything over that amount will bring them into the rate 4. Okay, so we then move on to cumulative, right? Now we know what his cutoff points are. And the advantage of USC, the one advantage of USC is those cutoff points are the same for us all, so they don't change. So to kind of take your point, the 231 is the weekly amount. So we're just going to say he's entitled in week 9, he's entitled to 231 by 9, 231 by 10, 231 by 11, and 231 by 12. Okay, because that cutoff point's not going to change. It's just we're giving them cumulative. Here it's 295.28 by 9, 295.28 by 10, 295.28 by 11, and 295.28 by 12. And here it's going to be the 820.42 by 9, by 10, by 11, and by 12. Okay, because those cutoff points, they're the same the whole time. But just when he moves on to cumulative, we just have to, we've rolled up the salary, we have to do the same with the calculation. Okay. Now, you would imagine that this is going to be 1.16 by 9, by 10, by 11, by 12, and that is what it's going to be. So we'll just prove the point. Okay, now see slightly off because of rounding, but see it would be 1160. So it's kind of, it's in around the same. And it'll be the same here. It'll be 591 by 9 by 10 by 11 by 12. Okay, so I'm just going to fill these in because these calculations are going to be standard. They're going to be the same every week. By, what's it, 2%. Okay. So those figures like will be the same. You know, these lads will be the same. It'll be 231 by whatever week, it'll be 295 by whatever week. This is what it is per week. And effectively, if you wanted to say in period 30, what is his rate 1 USC going to be? It's effectively going to be 116 by 30, okay? Because nothing has changed. Like it's just this, it's going to be the same calculation. But where you need to again keep your eye out is he has a cutoff point of the next 7,383 euros of his wages will be at rate 3. He doesn't have that. Okay, he has earnings of 6060. We've USC'd 2079 of it, and we've USC'd 2657. So the difference between those is what's going to be liable for USC at rate 3. Okay, so his rate 3 is going to be his wages minus what we've already USC'd, and that will be multiplied by 3%. Okay, so that's the only thing that is a little bit awkward, effectively, in the calculation, that you're referring back to the wages to make sure that you're not over USC in them. Okay, now I'll go through it all again in a second to make sure that it makes sense. Okay, and I'm just going to fill that down because it'll be the same calculation. Okay, so it's his wages less the rate 1 cutoff point, less the rate 2 cutoff point, and whatever's left over is what's liable for USC at rate 3. Okay, nothing at rate 4 because his earnings don't move him into that bracket. Now, sorry, we were told this fella had USC, previous USC, didn't we? 34 euros. I'm just going to add those up. So he has previously paid 273.95. Okay, so I just popped in the 34 that we were told about from revenue, and the 273.95 is just the sum of everything that he earned with us before, okay, or paid with us. Okay, so I'm just going to add up his USC this week. So it's the 1040 plus the 53 plus the 39.70. So what that is saying to us is, based on those earnings, he should have paid USC of 103.25. We know he has paid 273.95. So this week he's going to get a refund back. Okay, he's going to get the difference between the two of them, and this week he gets back 170 euros 77. Okay. No, you're grand. You do. Cumulative USC due at rate 4. No, you're grand. Okay, so period 10 then, I'm just going to repeat the process. I'm just going to add up the 3 figures. So at the end of week 10, he should have paid USC of 110 euros 12 cent. He has paid 103.25. So this week he's going to pay the difference of 6.87. Same process for week 11. He should have paid 120.14. He has paid 110.12. So this week he's going to pay the difference between them. Okay, the same for the last week. So I know I can feel the daggers coming at me, so I'm going to explain it again. Can feel the sighs and the eye rolls already. So this week 15.87. Okay, so I'm just going to